Hello and welcome to today's webinar. On behalf of European Pharmaceutical Review and Kneat Solutions, I'd like to thank you all for attending. My name's Caroline Peachy and I'm the editor of European Pharmaceutical Review. I'll be moderating the audience Q&A at the end of this webinar. So I'm delighted that joining us today, we've got Marcus Ryan, who's the Director of Consulting at Kneat Solutions. And Marcus is here to discuss mastering Pharma 4.0 validation challenges with technology. Following today's presentation, we'll move on to a live audience Q&A session where you can pose your questions to our speaker. Please remember you can submit your questions at any point during the webinar using the questions panel that's situated in the menu on the right. We've also got a couple of polls in this session, so I'll be back to do those. But now, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Marcus, who will begin the webinar today.
And thanks very much, Caroline, and welcome everyone to today's webinar, Mastering Pharma 4.0 Validation Challenges with Technology. So just start off with a little introduction. I suppose over the next 45 minutes, we'll explore Pharma 4.0 and validation, identify challenges and discuss mastering those challenges on a digital transformation journey. My own name is Marcus Ryan. I'm Director of Consultancy in Kneat, and I've worked in pharma for close on 20 years. The majority of that time in supply chain for critical quality systems, working to ensure compliance execution and that quality is achieved by design. In Kneat, I lead a team of consulting engineers and integration engineers, and they specialize in digital transformation and digitizing paper-based validation and GXP business processes. Kneat itself is the world's most advanced validation platform. It's used by 8 of the top 10 life science companies globally. It allows validation processes to be digitized and enables regulated companies to be compliant in Part 11 and Annex 11 and to achieve principles of ALCOA, increasing data integrity and driving operational efficiencies and decreasing overall time to market. So a little on today's agenda. We'll start with an introduction to Pharma 4.0 and digital validation. We'll explore the current pharma manufacturing landscape and some of the Pharma 4.0 key concepts. We look at the challenges that exist in digital transformation. We'll examine how we can master the digital validation journey and looking at those challenges. We'll close out with a summary and a question and answer session. So to begin, when we look at Pharma 4.0, our main reference is to the ISPE, which have issued their baseline guide for Pharma 4.0, and this aims to give pharmaceutical manufacturing organizations guidance on their digital transformation journey. Pharma 4.0 states that it's a representation of Industry 4.0 and its applied use and best practices in the regulatory world of pharmaceutical manufacturing. Industry 4.0, I'm sure, is a term we're all familiar with, and is best summarized as the intelligent networking of machines and processes for industry, utilizing the latest available technology. And perhaps as of late, it's layering in an increasing need for human involvement as it matures. Pharma 4.0 also aims to enable organizations to maximize the potential of digitalization and increasing speed to market. So we'll delve a little bit more into the ISPE issued guidance, and there's a lot of guidance as part of their guidelines. One of the key reference points for Pharma 4.0 is the concise diagram we have on the screen, which is the ISPE Pharma 4.0 operating model. Today's webinar will frequently reference this operating model and as we practically apply it to the digital transformation journey. And we can see we have two enablers, digital maturity and data integrity by design, which we'll talk through in good detail. And then we have elements as part of that, resources, information systems, organizational and processes, and culture. It's worth noting, especially as we contrast the Industry 4.0, that data integrity by design is a distinctive differentiator from the Industry 4.0 model. And that's due to the criticality of data and data-driven decision-making in the pharmaceutical manufacturing space. And it really is the main elevator of the requirement for validation 4.0 as an integral part of the Pharma 4.0 journey. We'll discuss all parts of this operating model as we walk through the webinar. But first, let's return to our introduction to Pharma 4.0 and discuss digital validation. So now we look at validation 4.0 or digital validation. And throughout this webinar, we'll see that it's a standalone pillar of the Pharma 4.0 evolution. That validation, digital validation, underpins crucial elements of the operating model. It can be seen as a key milestone on the digital maturity pathway. It's a critical enabler of data integrity by design, and it's a pillar of the holistic control strategy. So on our next slide, we're going to review the current pharma manufacturing landscape and look at how data flows in that landscape. On the screen, we can see a really basic representation of a manufacturing landscape. And this was demonstrating a process-centric or product-centric landscape. And it's shown diagrammatically information flow between process and products in a siloed fashion between digital platforms or other platforms. And it is generally classed as being process-centric. Within this, we can see that we'd have multiple instances of data entities and attributes in existence. And some of the classifications or statements we could make around this process-centric model would be to state that it currently is a mixed level of digital maturity, and many organizations work in hybrid working versions of both models. It can demonstrate that organizations have conflicting or misaligned strategies on digital transformation. It also tells us that data integrity design will have a hybrid approach, and that legacy systems can drive the approach to both data integrity and quality by design. It also demonstrates that manual intervention can be high and automated steps can be few. So now if we return to the same graphic and look again at our process-centric landscape, we can now share what a data-centric approach would look like. It's a very ideal state, and it shows the model becoming less process or product oriented and more data-centric. What a transformation journey takes us is it takes us from the process-centric model to the data-centric model. It focuses on the importance of data flow design, master data management, and single source of truth. So when we look at validation and where does validation fit in this landscape, validation is relied on to ensure regulatory and compliance adherence. It can be challenging to maintain the pace of hybrid work practices, increasing digital solutions which come with an increased rate of change, and maintain a master data management or a single source of truth across multiple entities, attributes, products, and process. If we consider the validation of GXP critical systems in that landscape, a very simplified view of the validation process might look like this. The questions we can ask ourselves here is, what data is critical amongst these systems? What status is critical? What data informs critical decision making? And which is my system of record or source of truth? How do I know that my data allows for an inspection-ready and audit-proof quality management system? With the rate of change of new technology and digital transformation happening at scale, how do we control change and ensure that a validated state exists and that its benefits are now available in the Pharma 4.0 world as part of an interconnected network of technologies and data flow? Validation demonstrates control over products and processes. In this simplified view, we can see validation across multiple digital systems. and that can add significant complexity to the validation process when we know that these digital systems have an increased rate of change and are themselves increasing in use and adoption. The dependency on data is increasing as opposed to paper-based or traditional validation evidence, and this means we have to be confident in the data we use, that it's trustworthy and integral. So before we move to more specific information on Pharma 4.0, we're going to introduce a quick poll regarding the challenges that are facing life science professionals.
Thanks very much. So we've got our first polling question here. So I'll read out the question and then we'll give it a minute or so for everyone to select their answers. So the first question, what are the top challenges facing life science professionals with respect to traditional paper-based validation? We've got 4 options for you. Is it paper-based artifacts and evidence, accessibility to data and reporting, data integrity and Alcoa, or regulatory compliance? So we'll leave this open for a minute or so. So if you can select one option, and then we'll announce the results shortly. So just to repeat, we've got 4 options here. What are the top challenges facing life science professionals with respect to traditional paper-based validation? Is it paper-based artifacts and evidence, accessibility to data and reporting, the age-old data integrity and Alcoa issue, or regulatory compliance? So we'll just leave it open just slightly longer. Fantastic. So the results are in now, and the majority, 42%, say data integrity, Alcoa. We've got 28% who think the top challenge relates to accessibility to data and reporting. And then 20%, 19% say paper-based artifacts and evidence, with 11% coming in at regulatory compliance. Marcus, I'll hand back to you.
Thanks, Caroline. And again, we can kind of see maybe as a cross-section from those results, there's ever-increasing pressure, I guess, on the validation data system to produce Alcoa plus outputs in real time, and accessibility to multiple systems. It's driving the need for quicker digitalization adoption. So just to hone in on Pharma 4.0 and its key concepts, Pharma 4.0 is primarily about transformation to allow us to leverage digitization to provide faster benefits for patients. People and organizations require a business strategy to achieve business goals associated with digital transformation. The move from data process-centric to data-centric now looks at the lifecycle management of data. And with data more central, data integrity becomes a core requirement of Pharma 4.0. Expanding on the operating model, we have our two enablers, digital maturity and data integrity by design. Digital maturity. Assessing an organization's digital maturity will result in a snapshot of its capabilities, and it's expected to demonstrate areas which organization's strengths and or weaknesses are visible. Using this assessment, organizations can use the areas of highest maturity to add immediate value to their Pharma 4.0 journey, and they can gap assess areas of lower maturity or areas of weakness and prioritize these accordingly, or use phased approaches while building out required competencies. And we'll see later on in the webinar how we can bring some of this into real effect. Data integrity by design is foundational to successful and effective Pharma 4.0 journey. When the key concepts is data flow in a digitized system must be designed up front. Consideration needs to be given to data flow, master data management, critical entities and attributable data, and human interaction where it exists. Criticality of data and data integrity at source and use of data in critical decision making all result in a prioritization of data in a data flow. And the move from document and process-centric to data-centric now looks at lifecycle management of data. So within the operating model, we've covered our 2 enablers. Now we're going to touch on our 4 elements. So I'll just describe them here, and then we look at in the next slide at how they come into practical use. So our 4 elements are resources, information systems, organization and process, and culture. The ISV provide a maturity assessment, which is quite a busy slide, and there's a lot of detail on it here on the screen. And when we use guidance or a framework or a model like this, it has to be interpreted in accordance with one's own organization and with organizational right sizing in mind. Again, we can see our 2 enablers, apologies, our 2 enablers, data maturity and data integrity. But it also has our core elements: resources, information systems, culture, and organizations. The guide provides us a way to establish the maturity level of various areas. You can see here on top, going from initial to optimized. And it's critical that an organization understands of all these elements and the dimensions to each element, at what stage they're at in their journey. We'll see how they come into play later on when we go through the practical application of these steps. But just to pick on a couple of these elements for the moment, we can see how they fit into a digitalized journey at the moment. So under culture, we have many dimensions, and activation and empowerment is one I'll highlight today. And again, we can see not so much the detail, but in the context of a maturity level of these particular areas or elements, we can see how we can use strong areas to assist in the digital journey, and also use the weaknesses as areas to advance or increase on our digital journey. We can see digital skills and workforce here. Integration architecture under information systems, technical ability to work on integration of data. And business strategy under the organization and process element. And again, an advanced or mature business strategy function will support a digitization journey to achieve its goals. These are all just samples of areas of digital maturity, and each are a stepping stone or a mini enabler on a digital transformation journey. The ISV Pharma 4.0 guide also breaks the validation 4.0 down into 4 key areas. And in reality, these are just subsets of the Pharma 4.0 journey. I'll just introduce them here just for a little bit of oversight. So the 4 key areas are quality by design, which ultimately is risk assessing or risk management, make sure that we're focused on the high areas of risk for our quality design. Data integrity by design, which of course Pharma 4.0 is characterized by increased data flow from many sources, so data integrity now takes a front seat. Integrated environments. So in the Pharma 4.0 world and the Industry 4.0 world, we have data coming from many areas, from processes, from machines, from product, from infrastructure. And record capture and information, which is key to the validation 4.0 journey. And within that, we focus on automatic attributability, review by exception, all areas of automating the record capture and information to provide a higher value output. So just as we move forward, we're just going to do one more poll just to capture some feedback on challenges experienced in the digital validation area before we move through to the next step of the webinar.
Sorry, apologies. So the next poll, we've got the questions up there. Which of these have you witnessed most in the last 12 months in the validation industry? So there's 5 options. Is it increased adoption of digital validation tools? Or have you seen decreased adoption of digital validation tools? Greater emphasis on risk management in the validation lifecycle? increase in digitised platforms for GXP or critical work processes, or change in regulatory guidelines and requirements. So again, we'll leave this open for a minute or so, and if you could select one answer. So which of these have you witnessed most in the last 12 months? So is it increased adoption of digital validation tools, decreased adoption of digital validation tools, greater emphasis on risk management, increased in digitised platforms, or change in regulatory guidelines and requirements? Just leave it open for another sort of 10 seconds or so. Fantastic. Thank you, everyone, for your votes. Marcus, back to you.
Thanks, Caroline. And was there a standout result from the poll?
Sorry, apologies, Chloe. Can you pull them up? There, yeah, fantastic. So 40% said a greater emphasis on risk management. We've got the next most popular was 29%, which said digitised platforms have been increasing. 21% said increased adoption of digital validation tools. Interestingly, nobody said that they've seen a decreased adoption of digital validation tools, Marcus. So.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. I think it's really a reflection of what we're seeing in the industry and why we're seeing so much assistance from guidance coming from the likes of ISB and from the FDA, and the greater emphasis on risk management. I think is one of these challenges we're going to touch on in a moment. The value of digitalization and digital platforms is coming strong, and making sure that we can properly bring those through at the right rate of change is key to pharmaceutical and getting the pharmaceutical industry and getting product to customers faster and more efficient. Okay, so we'll walk through the next two stages are around challenges in digital transformation, and we'll also look then at how we master that journey. So we've covered the intent of Pharma 4.0 and digital validation 4.0 and the concepts supporting it. So let's examine these challenges associated with moving forward on a digital validation journey. As always, the challenges can be viewed as opportunities also, but first you really need to master and learn how to navigate with these challenges. And we'll start with examining technology as a service. So the impact of technology as a service, cloud and interconnected systems. They really do provide powerful developments, and there is powerful developments out there in cloud technology and in as a service tech stack. And even going by our poll, we can see there's a general acceptance and adoptance of GXP as a service platforms. And this has resulted in a significant increase of technologies on the pharmaceutical manufacturing floor. This has produced constant change management to adopt the latest versions. It now presents the challenge of digitized data becomes evidence itself, replacing paper-based documents. Digital data integrity, accessibility and availability to that documentation or that data becomes critical in order to be investigation proof and audit ready. Master data management, multiple sources and versions of data, and multiple instances of data and related attributes now become part of the control strategy and lifecycle management. Systems of record and single source of truth have to be designed up front. And these are all challenges that are faced when you introduce new technology or new processes or workflow, such as a digital transformation or digital platform into an existing process. And this has all resulted in a larger validation workload to ensure that all GXP systems are in the validated state and that change management and compliance is managed effectively. Continue with challenges. Data integrity by design is key, and this can only be achieved by comprehensive knowledge of an end-to-end process and resulting data mapping and modeling and critical assessment of data components within the process. Real-time data and reporting and proactive decision-making. This requires confidence in the data. This confidence can be challenged during a typical transformation. It's often compared and viewed with mature systems such as paper-based or other systems that are in place a while, and it really has to rely on providing confidence on the data in order to be accepted. One of the biggest challenges is organizational challenges and challenges around change management. And these can occur at a global, a geographical, a business unit, site, or business process level. Part of those challenges are that business strategy and direction will be crucial in execution. And a fundamental challenge is that digital maturity, as we've seen in our earlier framework, is as much about organizational as it is about digital technology. Another challenge is that paper processes and evidence are replaced with data, and our control processes need to adapt to allow the benefits to be utilized. I guess in summary, are any of these challenges new? Not really, but again, as our poll indicated earlier, the pressure is now there more than ever for change, and technology now becomes the path or the path forward, and now organizations and organizational support becomes the challenge. So I'm going to return to the operating model for a moment. Now that we've examined the challenges, we can leverage this model to master these challenges on a successful digital validation journey. In order to master these challenges, we must be really familiar with the journey path. That ultimately consists with the why, the what, the how, and the who of the journey. The benefits that we can establish as part of the journey or anticipate as part of the journey are critical information points. When we have a holistic understanding of all these elements, it allows us to create our path to success, and mastering the journey is achievable. Over the next few minutes, we'll examine the why, what, how, and who, and the benefits. And we'll emphasize, and we'll fit together the shape of the journey and how we can use this knowledge to achieve success. So all these elements are really critical before I jump into each individual item, because putting them together and knowing them in advance, understanding them in advance, allows you to patch your way to success, or to develop your path to success. And we'll see all that come together in a couple of slides as we map out what a digital transformation journey looks like and how we navigate the challenges within that. So to understand the why, digital validation is key to optimum control and trust of all these digital platforms. Patience and speed to market. We need to increase digital technology adoption to reduce timelines. We need to achieve control and around data integrity and control of an ever-increasing complex level of validation data. We need to achieve quality and compliance, both internal and regulatory. We need to provide access to information, reducing manual effort and allowing more time to be spent on higher critical decision making. We need to have confidence in our system of record for validation status. This allows for change and review with easy accessibility to critical data. As always, our core principles are at our foremost. We need to ensure that they're inspection proof and audit ready, even within a changing landscape. So now we look a little bit at the what. And this really is about what a digital validation in an organization has to technically deliver. It really has to be purpose-built for life science companies and has had built-in data integrity of electronic records and e-signatures and account for automatic attributability. It needs to be advanced enough to integrate with all systems across your business, comprehensive enough to adapt to any of your validation processes. It needs to be performant at a global scale, flexible to adapt to all changes. So think about global and distributed workforces. powerful enough to enable real-time collaboration for all stakeholders, and agile enough to provide cross-functional teams with valuable validation data at a glance, data accessible to other parties and systems. And now we focus on the how, and the how is largely data-centered. Understanding our data landscape or process mapping allows holistic process understanding and allows accurate risk assessment of data and helps establish control and assign criticality attributes to each element in the overall environment workflow. It allows quality and data integrity by design to be built in upfront. It's critical that the data flow is understood. We need to map the process or get inputs from experts and SMEs in the required areas. And we need to think in line of priority of outcomes and criticality of events, and drive towards establishing master data management and single source of truth objectives. And finally, we'll move towards the who. We spoke about the importance of organizational support to the operating model and to transformations in general. Cross-functional organizational support is critical to a successful journey. Some roles may be readily available and defined, and some may need to be adapted by other leaders. Roles can be pretty subjective to your journey and to your organizational sizing. Some key roles that we'll find that make up the organization supporting a digital validation journey. Typically an executive leader or an organizational sponsor, CIO or something similar, and they act as a transformational leader. They might be driving multiple initiatives that are aligned. They can handle a lot of the top level change management and strategic vision. And they can help direct or steer cross-functional leaders. Other typical roles are business process owners and quality process owners. And it can be critical to ensure that we have buy-in from these roles to ensure that all requirements are met as we manage change, and that there's a little bit of stakeholder management of their groups and their functions as we're moving forward with a digital transformation. Support roles such as learning and development leaders, change leaders and project managers, they're cross-functional roles that are very important as part of the who landscape on who supports the digital validation journey, as they will be the ones who will drive a lot of the change management, change training, bringing the workforce up to a digitized level, making them a digital workforce. And lastly, we have knowledge leaders, community of practice leaders, and SMEs in various areas. And they contribute with their intimate knowledge to the holistic journey. So the last slide we'll touch on before we bring the whole picture together is the benefits. And this is one of the most critical parts of the process, understanding our benefits. And using your understanding of the benefits to define your expected outcomes. So we need to establish a clear business case and measure relentlessly to prove it. A transformation can be a short-term project and a long-term business strategy. We need to ensure success can be measured and demonstrated at each phase to continue momentum. We need to measure before and after metrics for key elements of the business case. Share these KPIs, these benefits and successful outcomes with a wider team. These metrics can consist of measurements against existing projects, measuring cycle times and existing processes, measuring deviations and findings both from cycle time and an actual count, and solicit feedback and internal CSAT or customer satisfaction from internal stakeholders, people who consume the outputs of your process or the outcome of your data, people who use reporting, people who make decisions. Accessibility to data and information along with real-time information reporting is a value outcome of the digitalization effort. And ALCO is never far away, measuring performance from legacy and paper systems to demonstrate the outcomes. A summary of the benefits is that technology is key. A clear and mature operating model is critical. As you map your journey and use gained experience and development, you can use that to develop existing areas within your technology roadmap or your skills assessment to plan for future phases. So in our next slide, we will pull together this knowledge and we'll apply it to a successful digital journey in which challenges are clearly understood and navigated to achieve success. So a holistic end-to-end journey starts with people and the organization. So we layer in some of the roles we spoke about: our CIO and sponsor, our business process owner and quality process owner. And these people can work through the whole spectrum of the project, at the front end, through the delivery and implementation, and as it continues on. So they're not just tied to one particular phase or part of the project. We layer in our learning and development people, our change leaders, and our knowledge leaders, community of practice leaders, other community of practice groups who may have attempted or be working on other digitalization events within the company or the organization, and knowledge leaders and SMEs who might have knowledge in the particular process or in technical areas of the journey that we're trying to achieve. We mentioned earlier that the digital transformation journeys can be a bit of an evolution, and it can look a little bit like that when you're mastering the journey and trying to plot your path through a successful journey. It typically starts with initial scoping and defining, maybe in a business case, what you're going to achieve and the ROI associated with that. That's where the focus on benefits comes back into play, and we focus on speed to market, compliance with Part 11 and electronic signatures regulatory requirements, increased collaboration, data integrity and master data management, and single source of truth. There's many other benefits we can put into that space as well. The key approach is that we capture those and we understand upfront how they fit into a business case and how we can extract value for those. That's why understanding the who and why and the what feeds into our business case, and we can use that to bring on stakeholders and bring on senior executives and other functional leaders on the journey to make sure that we have their backing and they have a clear vision of what direction we're going on. So when we get organizational buy-in, we kind of move on to the next phase, which is our execution phase. And again, typically this happens in rolling wave phases. We spoke about the importance of process mapping and data flow, and understanding the place our data has in the model. So we typically undertake a very strong process mapping step in which we use a lot of the roles that are available to us, such as the community of practice people who act as knowledge leaders, and also our quality process owners, our business process owners. And we bring them together to use their knowledge to map the process and to do assessments and to do other steps in order to really understand where data lies within our model. As you work through the execution with support of change leaders, project managers, and other leaders on the execution front, where we really come to is the performance management phase. So performance management, and again, it's about mastering the journey, is really the part where we tie back to our business case. We spoke of measuring our outcomes. Measuring our outcomes and the performance measurement phase can go on for quite a while, and the more data we have in the before part, so it's important to map data in legacy systems, older systems, and paper systems, but also important to map then the new systems and what delta we can see between the two and how do we measure those outcomes. And again, they can be across a lot of areas. They can be around like core principles, they can be around scalability and collaboration. There could be visible increased compliance. We can see deviations reduce. Certainly we can see operational efficiencies, reduced cycle time, reduced calendar time, and an increased availability of data. What these ultimately result in is these are the critical KPIs that we're going to measure our digital transformation journey with. And it's important that we produce them. We spoke earlier about publishing them and making them available to other groups, because typically we're going to have subsequent phases, or going to have developments or rolling wave approaches. And when we go to part 2 or part 3 or subsequent waves, we'll probably have to revisit a business case where we demonstrate the critical KPIs and the outcomes and the benefits. We'll develop new business cases and hopefully drive to adoption by others. So in summary, it's clear that Pharma 4.0 is the enabler of the future operating model for pharmaceutical manufacturing. It's also clear that Validation 4.0 and digital validation is core to achieving Pharma 4.0 success, and it's a key indicator of organizational digital maturity, and it's a pillar into achieving data integrity by design and maintaining compliance. Pharma 4.0 and digital validation is a continuous evolution and not a revolution. We are likely to experience that our organizational readiness lags behind the available tech stack for digitization, and therefore we must focus on organizational mindset transformation and support in order to maximize the potential of digitization and increase speed to patient. The historical approach of paper-based evidence via paper-based evidence capture is proven an organizational and cultural challenge as digital evidence starts to take its place in the quality management system. And we've seen that the operating model incorporates not just IT or digital tooling, but it also includes the organizational, the culture, and the processes and the resource aspects. Transformations are not just IT projects, but they're organizational, cultural, and they require change to process and resourcing approaches. So that concludes today's webinar. I thank you for your time today. I'll pass you back to Caroline for the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marcus, and for that really in-depth and insightful presentation. You gave a great overview there of how to navigate some of the main challenges within that digital transformation journey. And I'm sure like our audience will have some questions. So just a quick message for our audience. Remember, you can submit your questions using the questions panel in the menu on the right, and we'll try to get through as many of them as we can. I can see we've got a couple in, so let's start and take a look at the first question. Marcus, how important are the roles and organisational support to a successful digital journey?
Yeah, the roles are critical, really. And again, I hope maybe in the last part, as we see, the digital tooling is there, and there's loads of providers there for really good digital systems. A lot of the barriers are now coming from the organizational mindset and also the maturity of different areas in organizations. So from executive support down to knowledge workers, each element really depends on the correct roles and support from those roles for the whole journey to be successful. And there's a real risk, not just of not having the right people and the right knowledge in the room, but I think there's also a risk of stakeholder management misstepping without having the right roles and organizational support.
Okay, fantastic. The next question we've got in, where do you see artificial intelligence in the digital validation landscape?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's inevitable that AI is going to be part of the digital validation landscape, and I think we see that in every aspect of anyone who's involved in digital work. At the moment, it's the real buzzword. I think today it's unclear to what extent, and I think that's really down to the criticality of data and data integrity for decision making. and that decision making draws a straight line directly to pharmaceutical manufacturing and product release. It today definitely has the opportunity to provide assistance and allow processing of larger data sets or critical output. And I think that definitely reduce effort spent on low value actions or repeatable actions, and that will allow more time to be spent by SMEs on directly making critical decisions. I think it'll take a while for AI to mature and for the industry to get it to understand clearly how AI will be used more in depthly than that today.
Fantastic. Well, I hope that answers your question. So next question we've got, how do organisations that are assessed or perceive themselves to be on the lower end of the digital maturity scale, how can they achieve success, Marcus?
Yeah, well, it's very achievable. First of all, we see this a lot just on our own day-to-day kind of on the work front. And the answer is really with whatever means is available. So again, it's about looking at your organization and looking for, not to keep referencing the areas of maturity, but look for people who have the knowledge, look for people who have attempted similar activities, they might have community of practices, look for people who share the pain points of what your benefits solve. There may be parallel initiatives or a particular thought leader, and they might add a lot of value to your journey. And again, you might find a senior stakeholder or functional leader who'll be willing to support if the benefits are apparent. And start with a POC, a proof of concept, and get those wins on the board, get that data measured, keep reproducing that data, sharing it, share the benefits, and it'll eventually move from POC to initial phase to adoption.
Okay, fantastic. You mentioned many different success factors in your presentation, Marcus. What would you say is the single greatest success factor for digital validation?
Yeah, we maybe touched on them a little bit through the previous answers. Having organizational support, especially towards the front end of the project, is critical. And maybe support might be hard to come by, but having the right people involved or in the room or informed is definitely critical to the journey. I'd say as you move through the journey or the execution phases, measuring and publishing the benefits is probably the greatest factor following that. That allows momentum to gather. It'll bring in more support, more investment. That'll in turn create more ROI or return on investment for the organization, and you'll gather momentum through that pathway. So there's kind of maybe two areas I would always keep to the top of the list on factors for success.
Oh, fantastic, thank you. Again, I hope that answered your question. Looking at the future, so what is the future like for paper or traditional based validation processes?
Yeah, so it certainly won't be disappearing anytime soon. Let's say the traditional hybrid or paper-based approaches, and there's lots of organizations, even ones that are quite advanced in their digital journeys, still have a lot of traditional paper-based processes in place around validation and in general in the QMS space. I think what's clear, and you can see that from the response from the polls, you can see it from anecdotally from everybody in the industry. There is a significant shift underway. We're seeing that from the FDA guidance around CSA. We're seeing that from the Pharma 4.0 guidance from ISPE. And what that really is summarizing for us is the modal shift is underway, and now we're tooling or we're making ourselves aware what's the frameworks in which we can move forward with that. As we do move forward with that, we'll see the value coming from digital technologies really tip that balance. They're going to be accepted more. They're going the framework or the guidelines are going to allow you to accept it more. And we really see, in my view, more and more value coming from digital technologies. And companies will spend more and more of their time working with the data-centric side of that. and they'll get used to accessing accessibility of the data from digital systems. The paper will kind of find itself outside of that loop, and maybe a less valuable part of that, and it'll struggle to keep pace with the advancements in the digital world. So it'll be a bit of a tipping point at some point or other. So it's probably, to answer the question, I think paper and traditional based kind of validation will reduce in time once it goes past the tipping point in the not so distant future.
Okay, fantastic. I think we might have time for one more question. How do the different IT maturity levels within a company, how does that impact the effort needed for the validation digital process?
I suppose it can be twofold. So it depends where the strengths and weaknesses are, I guess. Some companies may have very, very strong core competencies. They may be what some might call traditional. So maybe they deal with an awful lot of on-prem, localized technologies and servers. Cloud may not be heavily adopted so far. And certainly maybe going past that into integrations or interoperability between systems may be less mature. So I think maybe the viewpoint of an organization that looks like that may look at application systems as silos, their own silos on site, and they may not see the advantages of cloud systems that speak to each other or talk to each other, and therefore may not have maybe the knowledge leadership to plan or create a journey that maximizes the value for that. So it may impact a little bit on the business case side or on the realized benefits, maybe in some areas. I'm not sure if that answered the question, but.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great response. Thank you, Marcus. Unfortunately, that's all we've got time for today. But I'd like to obviously extend my thanks to you for your presentation and the discussion today. And I'd also like to take a moment to thank the audience for taking the time to join us and for sharing those interesting questions. A quick note to our audience: as you leave the webinar, a very short survey will appear on your screen asking you to rate your experience today. So please do take a moment to provide your feedback, and if now is not a good time, the survey will be sent to you shortly afterwards. If you could please complete it, we'd greatly appreciate it. But for now, on behalf of European Pharmaceutical Review and Kneat Solutions, I'd like to once again thank our audience for attending today's webinar, and thank Marcus Ryan for his time today. We hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.